So by definition, energizers are risky endeavors, right? We talked about how important it is to take these small interpersonal risks so that we can gradually begin to feel safe and create this environment of psychological safety that Amy Edmondson has discussed. It's so important to consider that as a facilitator, you're the biggest risk taker, right? Because not only are you experiencing the Energizer and taking that small risk, but you're encouraging everyone else to take on risks for themselves, right? And you're the crafter of that risky environment. They're worthwhile risks, right? We know that they are, but we have to be very tactful in the way that we explore that risky space. And so that's exactly what I want to discuss with you right now. So risk number one, probably the most sensitive of all cultural sensitivities. When you do travel abroad and you start to engage with audiences that come from different cultures, diverse audiences that you might not even know where people are coming from, you need to be extremely careful in the way that you select certain energizers. There are energizers that could be much more touchy, right? Controversial for certain cultures. And so really think about this in advance. Talk to people who have experience working in that culture or are from that culture. You never know when you rub an individual or a group of individuals the wrong way, and you need to be very, very cautious. I'll give you an example. I was invited to the Middle East, and I'd been doing this animal farm exercise for many, many years, right? Where people adopt different animal spirits and they enact the animal and they make the noise while they're looking at another person. And so there's animals everywhere. You can assign the animals depending on the person's last name, right? So you have 5 or 6 different animals. We call it the animal farm. One of the animals that I had chosen randomly was a pig. And so hence you can imagine with Muslim participants that does not go down well. And so I had to apologize. They all completely understood, but you do need to be tactful around these topics. Another quick example, I was visiting Korea for the first time many years ago, and I was asking my participants to engage in a rapid prototyping exercise where they would build something very, very quickly and they would get feedback from a partner. And when I asked them to release their little prototype, their rapid prototype into the world, I said, let go of your babies, to encourage them not to fall in love with their creation and to be open to the rough feedback that they were about to receive. And I decided to put up a picture of a mother kind of throwing a baby out a window. It was a funny picture. It was a cartoon, and I'll never forget how I pointed to the screen, and then suddenly I saw the entire crowd just go from being really happy and engaged to pale and angry. Some of them were actually staring at me in offense, and I was thinking, like, what's going on? And one of the conference organizers asked me immediately to remove the slide, and so I did. Later, I approached him and I asked what happened. And he told me the story that during that particular time that I was visiting Seoul, there were a lot of mothers dropping their babies, their newborn babies outside of hospitals or churches and abandoning them. And this had become a bit of a social issue that was very broadly announced in the media. And I had, of course, no clue about it. And so these are the tiny little things that you need to be careful about. Some of them are unavoidable, but if you can plan just a little bit in advance by speaking to cultural locals, very, very helpful thing to do. 2, space limitations. Maybe not as sensitive as culture, but they really can make or specifically break certain energizers. You need to make sure that there's enough space for whatever kind of movement that you want to engage people in, right? A good example, I was invited to a large conference last year, and I was really planning on having people walk around the room and gradually get closer and closer to the person that they knew the least. I wanted them to engage with strangers. And as soon as I arrived at the conference hall, I recognized that it was tiny, it was tightly spaced. There was a lot of different chairs and tables that were going to get in the way. There was no way of asking people to move around. And so I had to rearrange my thoughts. I simply asked them just to stand up, look around, and meet another person with very limited walking possibilities. And so you really need to be strategic, thoughtful, in advance, right? Planning very well, recognizing where your event is going to be, visiting the venue in advance if you can. If you have influence in choosing the space for your workshop or for your meeting, make sure to find a large space. In my general opinion, the bigger the better, because that way you can really embrace the space. As you've seen, a lot of our workshops, a lot of our Energizers involve lots and lots of movement, and so a flat floor, open space, very useful. You can always consider asking people to leave the room and go outside. But all these things, of course, take planning. You need to see the little avenues that people need to take to actually access the outdoors. Is it going to take too long for 50 or 100 people to walk outdoors? Think about the exits strategies, if there's a lot of doors that we can use. All these things, you need to be very logistically attuned to the environment. Very important. Space. 3, try not to repeat Energizers. Right? Energizers are really exciting the first time that you do them, and then their excitement level drops off very quickly if you repeat them. There are certain exceptions like the Jerusalema dance where you need to practice this multiple times. It still keeps people on their toes and they see how they improve. You could think of other Energizers that might build in that same way, but most of the time, don't repeat Energizers. That's why it's so important to access the Percademy Tribe app and many other resources that I will be sharing with you to continuously have a new repertoire of Energizers that you can continuously access, a very big bucket of tools that you can keep fresh for all of your participants. So avoid repetition. Number 4, this is an important one. You need to differentiate between the skeptics in a workshop or a meeting and the cynics. The skeptics are wonderful additions to the group. They're people who sometimes are maybe overly analytical, that they think things through a little too much. They might be a little bit reticent to fully throw themselves in the deep end of the pool, and that's perfectly fine. It's an opportunity for you to massage them, encourage them, inform them, support with data, right? Talk about good examples, good results of Energizers, tell great stories, focus on the successes while you encourage them, right? Even give them some time out if that's what they need, but really focus on slowly bringing them in. Something I've noticed that sometimes the most skeptical of participants, right, the older man that I've been talking about often, are the ones who end up embracing the Energizer and open-mindedness approach the most. You just need to give them time, right? Keep the faith, right? Keep an eye out for them. Try to support them a little bit more than others. Highlight their successes, right? Bring a really nice spotlight to them when they take a little bit more of a leap of faith into your Energizer world. These are the people that I am fascinated with because they're the ones that really learn. They're the ones that really transform. They're the ones that really gain from these exercises if you are willing to invest in them, to hold their hand just a little bit, and then you just see them fly. And just now thinking about all the literally hundreds of skeptics that I have turned, it's probably the most fulfilling part of my job. So don't lose faith with the skeptics. Now, the cynics, those individuals who are potentially just gone too far. They're lost in the potential creative and open-minded process, right? The ones who are sabotaging or potentially even toxic. Usually this doesn't happen, but if you facilitate enough time, you'll come across these individuals. You might also catch individuals at a really, really bad time in their lives. Some individuals might feel forced by their bosses to participate. There might be an additional layer of toxic culture that you don't know anything about. There might be difficult relationships in the background. Fill in the blank. And so, very important to recognize when an individual is truly reticent, truly blocked, right? If there's some sense of anger or high level of annoyance, you need to be very sensitive. And so, what I've generally just done, because I work with adults most of the time, is to encourage them to spend their time somewhere else, right? To prioritize something else. Have them know that they do not have to do anything that they do not want to. It's important to ask them to potentially leave, because having someone remain in an audience or in a group being toxic and confrontational after a while kind of trickles down to everyone else. And so just for respect of everyone else participating, you can ask them to spend their time elsewhere. Out of my 18 years of facilitating, I've only had to do that once or twice, right? But it is important to make sure not to exclude the skeptics, right? Because they're the ones that have enormous possibility for change. And it is important to recognize eventually the cynics, because they're the ones that will not change and get in the way for the rest. So think about the skeptics and the cynics. And then finally, you have to recognize that inevitably there will be failures. The more you do these things, the more you experiment, the more confidence you get, right? The more creative you are in your approaches to facilitation and energizing, the more risk you will take in having something completely blow up in your face, and that's perfectly fine. People will always give you the benefit of the doubt, right? Especially if you adopt it with a sense of humor and playfulness and foolishness and not taking yourself too seriously. So when workshops or energizers don't go as planned, laugh it off, right? Encourage everyone else to laugh it off, and then just move forward. I cannot tell you how many times I've tried to implement a new energizer that sounded amazing on paper, that was told to me in all wonderful ways, and as soon as I pulled the trigger on it, it just completely fell apart in front of my eyes. Many, many, many times. Recently, I was trying to do this exercise where people needed to remain with a straight face, right? On one side of the room, and the other side of the room needed to make those people laugh by doing all kinds of weird things. And I was in a room full of Scandinavian engineers who are well known for being serious. And so they just kept a straight face. None of them turned, none of them laughed, none of them smiled, which was kind of the goal of the exercise. And after a while, I had 30 engineers standing like rocks. And as soon as I realized that this was not going to work, I just cut the plug and moved forward. People just giggled. They recognized that it was the wrong choice, and it wasn't the end of the world. So be ready to fail.